Hello and welcome back to the live guest spot here on Wild Wisdom Wellbeing with me, Robin Harris. And today I'm absolutely delighted to have our first returning guest, Tammi Townsend of PandaLillie. And Tammi is here today, different from what we were talking about the last time you were on, Tammi, but today we're going to be talking about lockdown. And because Tammi is a mum of 3 young children with another one on the way, plus runs her own business from home. So all of that juggling of homeschooling, running a business, looking after kids, and being pregnant, all of that stuff that's you've got going on at the moment, Tammi. And we're going to look at self-care and taking care of ourselves with all of the things that we're also trying to juggle at this time. So hi, Tammi, welcome back.
Oh, nice to be back. Always nice to be with you, Robin,
And always lovely to have you here. So if you want to just start, in case people haven't seen your first time as a guest here on the group, can you just tell us a little bit more about what you do briefly, what PandaLillie offers?
So originally I started out just doing wedding stationery and wedding planning, which led to event planning and, all events because they're always fun and it's something nice to do. I started doing greetings cards, bespoke ones, and then like some that I'll make several of and that's it, then they're gone kind of thing. And then obviously with the pandemic, there were no real events going on and all the weddings cancelled. And it was a bit, what am I going to do now? What do I do next? So I do t-shirt printing now. And I do balloon decoration, like balloon arches and the like. I'm trying to think of the actual term, but I actually can't think of the actual term at the minute. Balloon artist, I think they call it, or something like, balloon artistry. But anyway, balloon arrangements and we do gifts in balloons. So these are quite big 18-inch balloons and they have a pretty bow on the top and you can put pretty much anything inside them as long as it'll fit through the neck of the balloon. So that's basically what we do. And we started back in 2016. So that's what we do. That's what I do,
And you do jewellery as well, don't you?
Jewellery, yeah, that's another thing. Sorry. See, this is the thing I've forgotten about the jewellery. I thought, yes, I do jewellery as well. I have got some lovely pendants at the minute, which are on sale for Mother's Day. So, with that being 2 weeks away.
And I think probably this year people are going to be so aware of the fact that we've been separated from our families, not able to visit perhaps unless we're bubbling. But if families, certainly like my mum lives in Ireland, so I don't get to see her. I haven't seen her in over a year. It'll be probably about a year and a half. So that sense of I really want to send something that is gonna feel like we're connected, is gonna kind of somehow make up for the fact that we can't get together on this Mother's Day. I'm sure a lot of people will be feeling that and wanting to kind of reestablish those, reaffirm those bonds and those connections by sending cards, sending gifts.
I think that's the thing as well, because obviously how the pandemic has hit and in the way that it's hit, I haven't seen my family for a long time, apart from over a screen, which is great and it's lovely and it's a way of connecting. The only way of connecting at the minute though, and it's not the same as going around mum and dad's and raiding the cupboards to see what shopping I can take home with me this time, kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's not any real quality time with my niece and stuff, and my children aren't getting to spend time with their cousin, and it is hard. It's been really challenging, really tough, and like I say, that bit of contact with home has been great. But I can't wait until we can get back to being able to just get in the car and go and see mum and dad, and as I say, raid the cupboards, because why not? Why not?
That's what you do when you go to your parents' house, isn't it?
She's
what they're there for
now because of the pandemic.
You've got a lot of catching up to do.
But it's just one of those things, and I think it's very easy to focus more on what your children need during a pandemic than what you need during a pandemic, and you can very quickly fall into that trap of not looking after you, looking just after the people who are around you, and that's okay. to an extent, because then eventually it does hit you and you think, oh, you know, so you have to then take time for yourself. And I think it's important to take time for yourself. And that's kind of partly why PandaLillie was born, as it were, because I'd had a new baby, and George was probably about 3 months old at the time. He's 5 now. But he was about 3 months old. And I found myself thinking, I don't really want to go back to work. I mean, my job was fulfilling, don't get me wrong. I was working as a one-to-one at lunchtime with children in a school. And these are children with autism and, you know, eating disorders and things like that. And you're talking primary age children. It was tough, but it was rewarding, you know, making progress with these children. It was great and I enjoyed it. But having had my second child, I kind of got to see, I don't want to go back. And with it only being at a lunchtime, I would have had to pay all day for nursery fees. Nursery fees are not cheap. I would have had to pay for him to be there for a full week. I wouldn't have got to see him really growing up like I did. And that was another thing for me. When my daughter was born, it wasn't an option financially. I had to go back to work, and that was just the way it was. And so I did that, and that was okay. But I didn't want it to be the same with George, and it never was. So I thought, I need something to do. And, you know, I thought, right, I decided I wasn't going back to work. Right, I need something to do now for me. I look after the kids, I look after my husband, I look after the house, and what can I do for myself, you know? So hence PandaLillie was born. It gave me a purpose that wasn't just being a mum or just being a wife or just being at home all the time. And, you know, we're lucky enough to steal the last remaining room in the house and turn it into an office. I had told my husband before, I'm going to have an office in there one day, and he's like, no, you're not. And I was like, I am. That's going to be my room. And it did become my room. So, I mean, I share it with him now. He has about 2 meters of space, maybe 3 if you include his filing cabinet, but the rest of the room is mine. It's all my stuff in here, and, well, it's all my stuff in here, you know, plus Declan's birthday presents. So, you know, because obviously his birthday's on Sunday, so he'll be 2, and then, like you say, we've got another baby on the way, and then you realise how many appointments there are. And, you know, I've had 2 scans at the hospital so far. I've got to go back for a growth scan, and they're probably going to do 3 or 4 of those, they think. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I'll be here quite a lot then. And they're like, well, yeah, sorry, you're going to be here quite a lot. And I thought, wonderful, you know. With a pandemic, I didn't think there would be, but, you know, it is what it is.
And unfortunately now with the pandemic, having to do that on your own.
Appointments are on your own. I mean, the hospitals here are quite good. And partners can go with you for your 12-week scan and your 20-week scan. But as soon as the scan is over, they have to wait for you outside or in the car. So while you're waiting around for your notes to be handed back to you, you're just sat there on your own. And it's quite boring, actually. It's quite boring just sitting in a waiting room. But it is what it is. And I suppose they've got to do what they've got to do to protect themselves. But obviously, it's a very, very different pregnancy based on that. Just based on the pandemic alone, it's a very different pregnancy. And it's about finding ways to deal with that, you know. The reality is there's some women who have delivered their babies without their partners there. It's happened. Granted, they're a bit better about it now, and things have changed and we've moved forward within the pandemic and stuff. And I'm not due until July. And if our Boris is right, we'll be out of this by the 21st of June, which is just in time.
Plenty of time for you. Yeah.
For everything to fall into place, you know. So but like you say, it's important to look after yourself, and self-care is very important. And for me, it can be something as simple as, here you go, husband, here's the children, I'm going to spend 2 hours in the bath because that's what I want to do. Or actually, I'm just going to lie on the sofa and I'm going to take a nap, knowing that I'm going to wake up with backache, but, you know, I'm having a nap because I'm tired. And it's important to listen, I think, to what your body's saying. And, you know, otherwise you end up run down, and, you know.
Absolutely. And we can't give from an empty cup, can we? So we need to look after ourselves, and particularly when you have 3 other children.
And the boys are quite lively.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. Particularly when they're homeschooled and they've got all that energy that they haven't run off in a playground with their friends at lunchtime. Yeah. It's all in your house.
But this is the thing. I think that's the other thing. The boys have always been quite close, and they've always really enjoyed playing with each other. And I think that's been probably one of the biggest challenges. Not so much last year, because George wasn't in full-time school last year when the school shut. So he just didn't go back to preschool, and he was okay with that. And then he started school in September, and he realised how different it was, I think. And that was a massive milestone for him, a massive change. And obviously Alexia started in secondary school, and there's another big milestone. And both these things are happening, 2 days apart from each other. And I thought, oh my God, I'm back to only having one child at home. What do I do? And I mean, it's not going to be that way for very long now, obviously. But, it was a bit of a strange thing, but we found a routine with it and everything was great. And then obviously the schools got closed. And George really doesn't get on with his brother very well at the minute, because Declan's used to not having them here all day. He's used to having just Mummy and him, and George equally is used to being at school and being able to let off all this energy and so on and so forth. So they're bickering a lot, they're falling out with each other, and it's a real challenge sometimes. So I've taken to taking one or the other of them out for a walk each evening when Daddy's home from work, so that they can have that little break from each other, a little bit of respite from each other. Because I think sometimes that's what they need. They just need a bit of time apart from each other, because that's what they're used to. And it's amazing how quickly kids do adapt. You don't realise
they're very resilient.
Yeah. They'd adapted to, George had adapted to being in school 5 days a week. Declan had adapted to George not being there 5 days a week. And so then when that changes, it's that they're butting heads with each other, I don't know if it's just...
It takes that settling in period, doesn't it? They are resilient, they are adaptable, but like the rest of us, initially it's change. It's shock to the system. It's a whole, and because the whole of the dynamic of the life that they have suddenly become used to has been thrown up in the air yet again. The same for the rest of us, because we've struggled, haven't we, with all of the changes that keep being announced. Yes, you can meet. No, you can't. We're out of lockdown. We're back in lockdown. And as well, being here in Wales as I am versus in England where you are,
I think,
we're kind of at different points. Sort of, we're out of sync with each other, England and Wales. So we're always going, yeah, that's what England are saying, but what's happening in Wales? And it's an interesting one, isn't it? So for the kids, particularly the young ones like George, who this is a fifth of his life, and the first 4 years he won't remember in the way that we would have remembered those 4 years. For him, they will be much more of a blur. So for him, this is what his life is. It's this chopping and changing. It's going to school, it's not going to school, it's homeschooling. It must be such a challenge for them. I've been hearing little bits and pieces of how are kids going to survive, because they're not having the socialization that they would normally have at school with their grandparents, all of these things, different clubs and things that they would have been doing, going to the park even. They don't have that. But are they going to be particularly resilient, because they'll be so used to change? The rest of us kind of go, change, I don't like change, I'm used to my routine. They'll be going, change, yeah, I'm used to that. That happens all the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it is I think children deal with change in different ways anyway to adults. I think they definitely do. But equally, I think with something like this, of this magnitude, they're making history at the minute, these kids. They're at home, they're pretty much educating themselves. Yes, okay, there's a little bit of guidance here and there from a computer screen. Is that ideal? No. Is it better than nothing? Well, yes, it is. But they're making history at the minute, and my grandchildren, I say grandchildren because my children know they're not allowed to make me a grandmother until I'm at least 60. We've had that conversation. So my grandchildren will be learning about this in history when they go to school,
They will.
So it's great. It's great in a way, because, they've been a massive part of history, and they should be proud of themselves. But I think if you look at children and the way that they've adapted to learning from home and the progress that some of them have made, I mean, my daughter, she struggles in school. There's a lot of distraction from other students. There's children that do like to be silly in class. You get that everywhere. You get it in every school, but it's a distraction. And for her, I've noticed her grades go up since she's been homeschooled. via the school still, not by me. I don't think they would have gone up quite as much if she had been homeschooled by me, but they've gone up, and that's the point. You see, for some children, it's better being educated in that environment. For other people like George, he picks and chooses when he wants to engage in his learning. But it's just, I had a bit of a moment this week where I thought, there's no point fighting with him. You know, he's making history at the minute, and he's a real superhero, because I never had to do this. I never had to sit at home with my mum telling me, you will sit down and do your maths right now, because it just wasn't a thing. I was able to go to school and, you know, whatever else. I could go to the park and, you know, we could run around the supermarket if we so pleased. You weren't supposed to, but we could, you know, and they can't do that. I think that's another thing that George has found difficult. He used to love coming into Asda with mum, because Asda obviously is the coolest place ever when you're 5. You know, I mean, I can't think of anywhere else I'd less like to be, but he loves going to Asda. And obviously at the minute, you know, I either order shopping to be delivered, or we go and George has to stay in the car with Dad, or George stays in the car with Mum, or Daddy will go later on when George is in bed, so George doesn't know that we're going to Asda, because he'll get quite upset, understandably, because he enjoys it. But I think that's the other thing, they are losing a bit of enjoyment. But socially, I don't think kids will struggle. I think it will just build more resilient children. You know, because like we say, children are very resilient anyway, and I think the more we do to build that resilience, the less things that life throws at them will potentially affect them.
Yeah, absolutely. And
very, very difficult. I think
and as you were saying, each child is different. Some children will find lockdown they've had either peace and quiet, which has helped them to study, or they'll have more time with parents. I was talking with another friend who was a previous guest, Nick Morris, the photographer. I was talking with him yesterday, and he's great at posting on LinkedIn about things he's been doing with his 4-year-old son, who, you know, he's a photographer, and his 4-year-old son has been involved in that. So he's, I'm sure, learning loads of stuff which the regular 4-year-old wouldn't get to learn, because he, for part of the time, hasn't been at school as well. So there are lots of opportunities like that. And then there are the downsides, and there are the kids who might struggle more, because for them, being in a classroom when everybody has to all concentrate and you're in that environment, it's easier to concentrate.
Yeah.
You know, there are the two sides to everything, aren't there?
That's the biggest thing, though. I mean, I have the complete opposite from both sides. So Alexia wants to get back to school. She wants to be able to see her friends. She wants to be able to socialise a little bit more, and that's great. George, on the other hand, he's that kid who likes to play on his own. He likes to keep being himself. He likes to keep himself to himself. There's talk he might be dyslexic and possibly a little bit autistic, which goes along with, you know, wanting to be independent and left to it kind of thing. And I see it at home. If he's playing a game and he's engrossed in said game, and he hasn't invited Declan into said game, and Declan comes along because he too wants to play with the trains, it upsets George quite a lot. You know, so for him, he's not really looking forward to going back to school to see his friends, because he's just like, well, you know, you ask him, who are your friends at school, George? And he says, I don't know. I don't know what their names are, or, you know, and it is quite sad. You know, when you've got a child who's like, well, I don't really play with anybody, and you speak to the teacher and they're like, no, we don't really see him play with anybody. He'd hang around by the teacher, which is nice. But for him, social interaction has never really been something he's been interested in, which is okay as well. You know, there's no right or wrong here. Every child is different. They're allowed to be different. And, you know, like I say, my daughter has her circle of friends and she's looking forward to seeing them again. George, on the other hand,
and it's really about allowing each child to be an individual, isn't it? But also something else that you've kind of maybe not said specifically explicitly, but it's in there, that as parents, an important thing is to not put pressure on ourselves. To let ourselves just allow our children to be who they are, rather than the expectations of the school or the expectations of family.
Children should go to school and they should make friends and they'll have best friends and they'll be lifelong friends forever and so on and so forth. But it's not that way for every child. And I think I sat for a while thinking, well, why is George so different to Alexia? You know, and then I sort of realised, actually, do not know. It's fine. He's okay. He's happy. And as long as he's happy and content, I'm basically doing all I can, you know. I can't do much more for him. I can't force him to make friends if he doesn't want to make friends. The fact of the matter is he's happy being on his own, and I'm okay with that because that's how he wants to be, and that's okay. But there is a lot of pressure. I think sometimes we do pile pressure on ourselves as parents. Like, you know, one child has 20 friends and the other child has 2, and it's like, what do you do to even that out? There's not a lot you can do, you know. And it's about not remembering that it's not you as a parent that's causing that situation. Your children are all individual, they're all different, they all learn at different rates. And that's another thing, that the pressure on children. And I didn't realise, I mean, it was the last year my daughter was in year 6, when the schools last closed, and I really realised just how much pressure there is on children of, you know, 10 and 11 years old to meet the national average. And you just think it's impossible for every child to meet the national average. But schools pride themselves on all of our children in their year group have met the national average. So when you get that one child that isn't meeting the national average, they want to push and push and push and push and push and push. There's no point pushing, you know. And that's one thing I'm finding with George. They've said to me, well, you know, he's a bit behind and so on and so forth. And if his birthday was later in the year, we wouldn't be as worried, but he's one of the older ones in the school. And I thought, well, so be it. You know, if he's a bit slower at picking up, learning the sounds, he's a bit slower at that. And I'm okay with that. And I've always been okay with that because, yes, education is important. It is important. But it's not the be all and end all. And I didn't leave school with very many qualifications. Neither did my husband. Yeah, we both run our own businesses now. So, and for me, it's make me feel better, you know, so that I have something that's for me and for me to, you know, take a break from motherhood, close my door on the office and just be like, no, I'm going to sit here and throw glitter around, or I'm going to crochet another baby hat to add to the 200 that I've already made for this baby that's not even born yet. You know, it's fine. It's okay to do that. It's okay to decide as a parent, you know what, I'm going to stop. I'm going to take 5 minutes for me, because inevitably, as you said, you cannot do anything when your cup is empty. You can't really be there for your children. You can't look after yourself, and you have to look after yourself first. I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned is looking after yourself first is probably the most important thing.
And not only are you effectively, when you look after yourself first, you are not just looking after yourself.
No,
to me,
you are
because you are role modeling. You are showing your children it's really important to look after yourselves, guys. And you know what, find what works for you as an individual. There are these expectations, there are these norms, but if you don't match them, that's okay. As long as you still do what you can for you and you still support, I mean, obviously you're still supporting their growth and you're encouraging them to follow what lights them up. But if that's not a norm and it's not society's decided a target, that's okay, as long as the child is doing what they love, is growing, is learning, is being happy.
The thing is,
rather than
she's had a few tests and stuff, and she'll come down to be like, oh, we only got like 2 out of 10, and I'm like, well, did you try your hardest? And she says yes. I was like, well, then that's all I can ask of you. As long as you're trying your best, that's all that matters to me. You know, it's like my dad had a conversation with Alexia last year about SATs and stuff, and this was when they were still planning on the year 6 SATs going ahead, and then obviously COVID put a stop to all of that, and it wasn't happening anymore. And my dad said to her, well, year SATs don't really matter, so don't worry about it. And he said, your mum won't like me for saying that. And I just said, hang on a minute, Dad, actually, no, I agree. I actually agree. Because with the pandemic the way it is, they were going to have to find other ways to assess children and work out what level they're working at. And that's how they worked out what bubble they would be in at school then. And, you know, it's fine. You know, as long as my children try their hardest. And Alexia, I know, does. George, on the other hand, I think, likes to push his luck a bit at school sometimes. You know, he likes to push his luck a bit. But he'll get there.
It's being able as well as the parent, I think, to assess, because you know your children really well, living day in, day out with your children, having given birth to your children and seen them the whole of their development since then, to be able to see, when is my child trying, when is my child not trying because they're afraid to fail, you know, if they're being pushed. When is my child really loving this topic that we could use that to inspire them and maybe bring in other couple of things? Because weren't you saying that George loves to bake?
He does.
So
He
as
enjoys
soon as
baking
you start
and
baking, you're
building
using
Lego.
maths.
Yes.
You know, you can bring in all of those things. You can bring in weights and measures, which you would learn at school, but do it in a way that doesn't feel like learning. It feels like fun.
And that's the thing with George. I kind of, when the schools decided, or when Boris decided to close the schools in January, I sort of sat down and I thought about it. I thought, right, well, we've got this week's work, and on Friday I'll send work for next week, and they'll keep on doing that until they're back in school, and that's fine. And I can do that. And I was looking through the work, and I'd pull out the bits like, he'll do that, and he will do that, and he will do that. Right, that's half an hour's work for that day. And I'm okay with that, because I know he's going to sit and he's going to talk to his teacher for between 15 minutes and half an hour. And he's only doing an hour of solid schoolwork a day, because he learns a lot more through play because of his age. And it's so easy to forget at 5 years old, children still learn more through play than they do anything else.
Tammy, so do we.
Yeah.
I don't think that stops.
This is the thing. And I don't think it does. No, I think I've learned a lot more through sitting in my office throwing glitter around than I have, you know, actively sat there trying to remember, right, okay, let's figure this out. But he enjoys building Lego, and some of the things he's building, and it's so great, because I don't know if you know now, Lego is a bit of a thing where you buy this set of Lego and here's your instructions on how to build this Lego, and it's great. And George loves that side of Lego, don't get me wrong. He thoroughly enjoys it, as does his dad, and they sit and they build it for hours, and that's fine, and I'm okay with that. But what I really, really, really love more than anything is when a child gets to use their imagination, because I think that is so crucial, and that's what Lego came from. It was built for creativity.
When I was a kid, we had Lego, and I don't remember there being
a booklet.
This is just the pieces to create this spaceship or whatever. That came later.
I mean,
I just remember you had a load of
extras, but you know,
yeah, you had blocks. You had a base, and you had blocks, and you built and you put in, you know, it was usually houses and windows and stuff, and they had all of those. But you could build whatever shape house you wanted, or whatever height, so long as you had enough bricks.
This is it.
It wasn't. It's only these pieces that go together in this way.
And it is a frustration. And don't get me wrong, some of them are absolutely spectacular once they're built. And yes, they do take a long time, especially when you're building them with a 5-year-old. But George has found this passion for Lego, and he doesn't just want to build something with it. He wants to build it and then count how many blocks he's used afterwards. So he's using maths. He's vocalizing, this is how many blocks I have used in this particular project. And he takes photos of them on my phone, which is fine, you know. We'll get them in an album for him, you know. Do you remember when you were 5 and you built this with Lego, George? You know, it's great. He loves it. And that, for me, is what Lego was about. It was about creativity. You'd have all these different coloured blocks. I think they came in red, green, yellow and blue, I think, were the original 4 colours of Lego, you know. But he found out yesterday in his lesson, because the book of the week was the Superworm. And he loves listening to stories. But he also found out facts about worms yesterday, one of which being a worm can be cut in half and still survive. So, of course, he went out into the garden digging for a worm to try and cut it in half to see if it survived. Now, obviously, he couldn't find a worm. Perhaps that's not very obvious. We have a mostly paved garden, so he couldn't find a worm.
Struggling to find somewhere to dig.
You know, it's just one of those things. But, you know, when he hears something and he wants to actively engage in it, he will. When he sees something, he wants to engage in it. And we do a lot of learning with his trains, because he loves trains. We walk down to the train station so he can count the carriages on the train that goes past. And I discovered the other day that works really well if you time it just right for a train, not when you've got to wait an hour and 45 minutes for the next train to the station. Because the timetable changed a bit with COVID as well, you know. But the kids loved it. It was out and we were in the fresh air and it wasn't raining. And we got back just in time for it to start raining. So that was lucky, you know. But I think it's just like you say, there's a lot of to and fro, isn't there, between what's going to happen next. And yes, we've had this roadmap set out for us that we should be out of lockdown by the 21st of June in England. I don't know if it's the same in Wales. I struggle to keep up with what's going on in England, I'm afraid, you know. But it's only going to take one thing not being just right for the next stage to not happen. So as much as you said the 21st of June, there's still a lot of uncertainty around it, isn't there?
And I heard one person on the news the other day and saying, we can't go back into lockdown. We must And I was thinking, you are setting up all of these expectations that we were talking about in terms of kids and their learning, but we're no different. So all of these expectations for us, and we're already frustrated. We're already fed up with being in lockdown, fed up with not seeing and having contact with friends and family. And yes, we probably all will go, yeah, we can't go back into lockdown. But if we do, and that's our belief, how is that going to impact on our sense of well-being? Yeah. To find, oh no, it's not true. We have to go back into lockdown.
Yeah, I think that's
versus being open.
Expectations, don't we? And, you know, the reality. I mean, I spoke to a very, very, very good friend of mine, not you know, a couple of days ago about, but your wedding should be able to go ahead this year, you know, in October, because we're supposed to be out of lockdown by June. And she said to me, I'll believe it when I see it, because he has said this a heck of a lot of times and nothing's ever come of it. We've always either ended up released out on day release or on release for a couple of months and then, sorry, we're locked down again, you're not allowed to leave the house. And I think for her it's really difficult. She's had to postpone her entire wedding and everything was all set to go, and it's hard, you know, for people who are, I know somebody who's had to reschedule their wedding 4 times now. And you just think, gosh, like, how must that be for them, you know? And a part of the problem as well over here, I'm noticing more and more people are out and about. There's big crowds of children in the park yesterday when I was walking down to the train station with George, and there was a big crowd of about 14 children in the park, all from different households. But, you know, things like that happening are not going to help the situation. And I think that's the difficulty here is everybody needs to do their bit. But that does include parents knowing exactly where their children are. And let's be honest, not all children are really where they are really going, are they? So it's hard. It's a group effort, isn't it? But yes, hopefully we will be out of this pandemic soon.
But in the meantime, like you were saying, it is hard. And I think it's very important for us to recognize that fact, not just because we kind of skim over it because everybody's in this, we're all in the same storm, maybe not in the same boat, but we're all in the same storm. Yeah. So everybody, by and large, maybe everybody's too sweeping a statement, but most people are finding things really, really challenging, at least, if not very difficult. So we have to honor that, recognize it and honor it, and cut ourselves some slack, and to take that time for self-care, to realize that because in the Northern Hemisphere, obviously we've just had winter, it's been quite a hard winter, all those short days, you know, early evenings, it really does take its toll. It drains our energy, and we need, now that spring is coming, to just still take that time for self-care and rest and trying to build ourselves up again, I think.
But I think that's the other thing, you know, there are groups of children in parks, and maybe that's their way of taking care of what they need. And there does need to be a bit of understanding around that. Yeah, okay, it's frustrating, and yeah, it could mean we're in lockdown a little bit longer. But do you know something? I think everybody's mental health matters. And I think for children, they're not going to school. They're not seeing their friends inside of school. They're not able to hang out after school. They're not allowed to have them around to play computer games or have them around for tea, or they're not having birthday parties, or, you know, and all these things are so different for them. And I think that's the thing. Children, yes, they are resilient, but even the children, particularly the older children who really understand what's going on, I think are struggling as much as adults are, if not more.
Oh yes, I think so.
So I think them taking time for themselves, and if it is going for a kickabout with a friend at the park, why not? You know, and that's the thing with it. It's, yes, people are frowning upon it as if to say, oh, that's terrible, I hope your parents know where you are, and, you know, you're always going to have those people. But the fact of the matter is, those children are taking care of their well-being, their mental well-being, and that's probably to them a little bit more important. And frankly, I think a lot of them feel a case of this virus, but why can't I go and see my friends? So there isn't a full understanding of it. And the thing is with schools, no one can really explain it to them. No. And the doctors who come on the telly are not explaining it in childlike terms, so they're not going to understand the reality of coronavirus and stuff. So,
and probably people are trying to shield them to a degree, to give them information at their understanding level, not to be seeing all of the statistics and the really frightening things that, because I'm sure there are a lot of kids who are really struggling to get, you know, to deal with that, who would struggle to deal with that sort of thing, or are if they're exposed to it. But as well, like you were saying, I think one of the important things is balance, and to remember that we are mind, body, and spirit, soul, whatever we want to call it. There is an element that we can't really put our finger on, isn't there? There's some other essence that we need to take care of as well. And if we're not taking care of the emotional side, and we're not taking care of that other intangible side of ourselves, how can we have physical well-being? Where is our immune system going to be? If we're indoors all the time, we're not getting fresh air, we're not getting natural light, we're not getting social, because we're social beings. We need that.
I think,
and it's the bottom layer of Maslow's triangle. So if we don't have that, where is our well-being anyway?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with winter. It's hard. It's a hard time to have a lockdown in the middle of winter as well, because
it is.
Last year it started in March, so it started in springtime. So the days are already getting longer, so there's already hope, and the sun's out a lot more. The weather's brighter, and when the weather's brighter, you just feel brighter. It's just that automatic. I can't think of the word, but it's just one of those things. It's just that it just is, you know, it just happens.
Well, it works on your pineal gland, which affects your mood. And also, we could meet up outside.
Yes.
So although we couldn't touch, we couldn't come close to each other, we could still socialize to a degree.
Yeah. Whereas now we can't do that at the minute. And I'm very grateful the nights are getting longer.
Yeah.
If not a bit fearful that people have gone on for more than a year by the time we do come out of lockdown, and lockdown restrictions are fully lifted at the end of June, you know, so that's a year and a half nearly will have been unable to live as normal. But then I had a conversation with another friend of mine who works in the medical professional. She's a nurse practitioner, and I was saying, you know, I think a lot of people are like, I can't wait to get back to normal, but the reality is this now is normal. Leaving the house, I have to think phone, keys, face mask. Never had to do that before, but we do now. And it's just an automatic thing. Before I go into any shop, I've got my face mask on and I'm ready. I have a shop across the road from my house, and in case I forget to put it on as I get to the shop, I put it on before I leave the house. And it's fine. Although I also tend to forget that I've got it on when I'm walking home, and then I walk into the house and go to take a sip of my drink or something and realise, hang on a minute, I've still got my face mask on.
Yeah.
But that's now normal. That's a normal event in my house now, and that's okay. And I'm okay with that if that has to stay a thing. But this is what I mean. What is normal? What was normal? I can't remember what normal was anymore, because it's been, you know, so long since we had normal, you know.
And the messages have been so strong that need to stay at home, need to wear masks, need to sanitize regularly, that although the relativity of the time is short, I know it's a long time, but it's relatively short for us older adults rather than the kids, but still the messages were so strong, and they're so deeply ingrained, and they've been so connected with survival as well. That it's really been, no, I really, really must. I can't forget. And now we're changing. How do I do that? Because I still must wear my face mask, mustn't I?
That's the thing.
It's ingrained.
It's that thing, isn't it? It goes back to juggling. Like, you're juggling all your, you know, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions as an adult, and you're caring for your children, or you're caring for your spouse, or you've got other responsibilities that aren't just solely you as a person, and that's okay to have that. But it is a juggle of, right, so this is what normal means to me, but what does it mean to my children? Because what's normal to me might be completely different to my 12-year-old daughter, and again, completely different to my 5-year-old, and absolutely definitely different to my 2-year-old. So it's that battle between, right, okay, so what do we do as a family to decide, well, this is what our normal is going to be, you know? I mean, will we ever be able to go into a supermarket again without wearing a face covering? I don't know, is the honest answer. Everyone's at risk while the virus is still out there. And that's the reality, isn't it? The virus isn't likely to be going anywhere anytime soon. it's still going to be there. Yes, okay, we're going to build resistance to it by having the COVID vaccines and things like that. And, you know, but then there's another thing there's a lot of speculation about, and it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? You know, it is a very, very vicious cycle that we're all stuck in. But one thing that remains the same is that we are all in this together. We are all in this together, and there's no one person who should or shouldn't feel the way that they're feeling, because the fact of the matter is we are all entitled to feel how we feel.
And it's an interesting point that you brought up there about, obviously, Declan at 2, his needs and his wants are very different from George at 5, very different from Alexia at 11, 12, and very different then from adults as well. So it's the family is the kind of microcosm of the whole, the reflection of that, isn't it? That, well, we have to find a way together with all our different needs to find something that works for us as a family unit. But in the same way, in society, we have lots of different perspectives, different views on the vaccine, different views on wearing face masks and going outdoors or not, mixing and mingling or not. And it's how then, coming together as a society, do we make space for all of those? Or even back in the day before coronavirus, how do we make space for difference? For George, who doesn't enjoy a classroom, but Alexia, who's actually looking forward to going back to school.
Yeah.
I love actually that we are all so different and we have all these different perspectives, and that they bring richness and flavour and variety. But the challenge is, how do we, as a society, as soon as you put 2 people together, let alone billions of people together, how do we find a way that isn't too much compromise, that I feel I'm giving up too much of my side of things, but equally isn't, well, I'm going to take over what is your
and that's the thing, is I think
perspective.
That's the difficulty, and it's a bit like a marriage in some ways, isn't it? You know, like, you're going to have your differences, and me and my husband are not completely opposite, but are very, very different people. He enjoys being outside all weathers, playing with vehicles. I, on the other hand, can't think of anything worse than being outside in all weather, having to fix a car. But it's what he enjoys, and he's passionate about it. And he's an electrician. Yes, okay, I helped him become said electrician because of his dyslexia. I would sit and I would read book after book after book, and I'd have to read the sentences 7, 8, 9 times. But once I'd read it and he understood it, that was fine. We can move on. So technically, I'm a qualified electrician too, but it's not my passion and it's not a career path I wish to take. So that's just not going to happen. We'll put a stop to that now. I need to do something creative because that's what I need to do. But then equally,
with glitter, preferably.
Well, yeah, obviously. Eco-friendly. Eco-friendly, yeah. So we're all good. Better for the environment. But you see, that's the thing with me and my husband, you know, we are both very creative-minded. But because we're both creative-minded, sometimes there can be a bit of a clash, shall we say. A creative clash. Because that's just what happens sometimes, you know. It is what it is. But then it's a bit like what's going on now. There's all these different opinions. Me and my husband regularly have different opinions. I think we should have beans on toast for tea. Well, I want sausage and mash for tea. You know, and these differences of opinions aren't a bad thing. But equally, at the same time, when all said and done, there are a lot of opinions out there with regards to coronavirus, to the vaccine, to the way things are being done, to the fact the Prime Minister didn't act quickly enough. Oh, he acted too slowly, or oh, he's acting too harshly. And you know, as many people will say he didn't act quick enough, or say actually no, he did act at the right time, exactly the right time. And it's so hard for him, especially as a Prime Minister. You know, he's in charge. No other Prime Minister has faced what he has. No other Prime Minister has faced what he has. You know, but you see jokes regularly about, please hurry up and open the salons, Boris. It looks like you could do with a cut. And you just think, but is that necessary? Do you know? Yeah. And it's like the poor bloke is probably losing hair and losing sleep, thinking, have I done the right thing for the country? You know, and you don't know. And I think that's the biggest problem we have, is we can't walk a mile in somebody else's shoes.
No.
And I think if we all were given the opportunity to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, we would probably all have a much bigger and broader understanding of all these different things in the world. Like, you know, why the decisions that have been made to close schools and close the pubs have happened, and it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's not.
Like you said,
And
there's
it's
billions of people.
Yeah, and we compare quite often in the media. They compare this country with another country.
Yeah.
And I think there's some merit in doing that, but their situations are so different. I don't think we can really do a comparison, but more a look and see, ooh, is there something there that might work for us, that might be, like looking for good practice in another organization or whatever.
So George,
you got somebody at the door.
What's the matter, George? He's just stood at the door huffing and puffing now. But yeah, it's one of those things, I think, where it's very different in England than it is in Wales.
Mm.
Yes, darling. Yes. Yeah? Go and ask them. Just close the door, darling, please. Close the door, please. Yeah. Okay, all right. So Declan was having a nap. It's just this is juggling work and children, and fine,
This is life.
Go, bless him. He did knock on the door patiently, but it's one of those. What do you do in that situation? But I knew if he was really, really desperate for mummy, he would just open the door, as he did. So, and but like we were saying, things are very different in Wales than they are in England, and things are very different in Scotland. And that's the difficulty, because I could sit here and say, well, it's not fair that the children in Wales are back at school now and my children aren't. But the situation in Wales, in regards to case numbers, is very different to the situation in England. And I think that's the problem, isn't it? It's easy to criticise and say, oh, well, it's not fair. New Zealand are doing great, and I'm happy for them.
And Australia.
Yeah.
Certainly certain parts of it. I don't know the whole of the country. But their situation is very different in terms of the vaccine and everything.
They knew it was coming. They had a bit more time to prepare, and they knew it was coming. And the second that it did come, they said, right, nobody's coming in and nobody's going out, and that's the way it is, and that's fine, because that's what works for them. But that wouldn't have worked for us, because we had people who were working abroad and people who were on holiday abroad, and they had to get them back because they can't just leave them stranded abroad. And that was part of the problem.
Which is why we can't make direct comparisons.
Yeah, exactly. Because everybody's circumstances are different. And I think this is the thing. My circumstances are probably different to Peter Burns down the road. It's everybody has different circumstances. Everybody's in different situations. I'm very lucky. I'm at home with my husband and my 3 children. There are people who live just down the road, and they are literally on their own. They have nobody. They have nobody visiting them, and they're okay with that, because they'd rather be on their own and lonely for a little while than catch the virus, because for them it could be deadly, and that's the reality, isn't it? But it's still not nice to see. But when we were all clapping for the NHS, I don't know if that was a thing over in Wales, but it was quite a big thing here. And it was quite nice, because you see all the elderly people just out in their gardens, and that for them made their week.
It's another way of connecting, isn't it? We're all doing something together.
Yeah, we're all in this together, but equally that's probably the only real contact that they had with any other person outside of their house every week. And then when it stopped, it's just, okay, so we'll just back to this then, and they're okay with that.
So having said that, a lot of people were in that situation even pre-COVID, and maybe COVID has given us a greater understanding and empathy for the fact that maybe there are people out there who don't see anybody from one end of the week to the next. And to maybe, because we've maybe taken more, that community spirit, we'll reach out, we'll check in, are you okay? Have you spoken to anybody today? Do you want to chat?
But that was
so there are pros and cons, aren't there? There are things that we've learned.
Yeah. I had George when Alexia was at school, and the only other time I would see other human beings is when I went to take her to school and when I picked her up from school in the afternoon. And when I had George, it was just, I'm just at home with the baby. And, you have to find other ways to connect, because that can't just be life. And I really hope very, very soon it does come to a point where it doesn't have to just be life, where I'm just the mum who's just at home and I'm just trying my hardest to run a business while educating 2 children and keeping a toddler occupied, as well as keeping up with what time I'm due at the hospital and on what day I'm due at the hospital and what day I'm at the GP surgery. And it's a juggle, and it is hard. And have I sent my husband's invoice this week? Because that's another responsibility as his wife that I have. but it's all good. It's fine, and we're doing it, and it'll get better. It'll, with time, it'll ease. But I can't see much changing until COVID's numbers are down. And I'd rather be that way because it's safest. It's what's best for me. It's what's best for my family. It's what's best for everybody. So I think we've just got to play it by ear a bit, haven't we? And wait and see what happens. And eventually we'll be through this pandemic and we'll be back in the world.
And I think that's the thing to remember, that all things change.
Yeah.
This too will change. This too will pass.
It will.
So what we need to do, for me, is to just take care of ourselves.
Yes.
Take care of, look out for other people if we can, if there are neighbours around us or family members, like my mum's on her own. And just, do the best we can and not put too much pressure on ourselves.
And that's the important thing, is the key thing is not to put too much pressure on yourself. Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think self-care starts with yourself. Teaching children self-care starts with you as a parent, because if they see that you're taking time for you that you need, then they too will understand. Occasionally my child will come to me, my daughter will come to me and say, Mum, I just need to spend half an hour upstairs on my own. And there's one half of me that's pulling at me like, oh, but she's isolating herself, and I don't know if I'm ready for her to do that yet, because she's a pre-teen, she's a teenager in training. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I like this, but hang on a minute. She's just said to me, I need half an hour on my own. She knows that that's what she needs, and she's trying to listen to that, and that's important. That's a very, very important thing there. She's just acknowledged that she needs half an hour to herself, and she's 11. Hang on a minute, that's a bit, how is that a thing? But it is a thing, and it does happen.
She's self-aware, but where has she got that self-awareness from?
This is the thing. I mean, I would like to say she probably does get it from me, but maybe she doesn't. Maybe it's just something she's learnt with time. But because I wasn't very good at taking time for myself, I make sure everything else is sorted before. The kids have to be in bed and settled before I'll even consider, right, I'm going for a bath now, because my husband's great and he loves the boys and he just loves spending time with them. And because he gets such little time with them, because he works the long hours, and sometimes they're in bed before he gets home from work. And so when they're not and he's on bedtime duty, they are not going to bed on time, which is one of the biggest annoyances I have. And this is what we were saying, everybody's different. And to him, that's okay, they're not going to bed on time. But to me, it's like, but tomorrow you're working late, and that means I'm going to be on bedtime routine, and these children are not going to go to bed when Mummy tells them to, because Mummy's not cool enough. Mummy won't let us play for an extra 2 hours after bedtime, and it's okay. It's fine at the minute, but the reality of George's going back to school on the 8th of March, and we need them in some kind of military routine, because it is a bit like a military operation getting the kids out to school in the morning, having 3.
I can imagine.
I mean, Alexia's fine. She sorts herself out. She leaves the house at 8 o'clock. She gets to school. She rings me when she's there. We have to leave at 8:45 to get George to school on time. But Declan's just not going to get his clothes on in the morning, or he's going to run off just as you're about to change his nappy, or something catastrophic is going to happen, or he will just be leaving the house at bang on 8:45. George's like, Mummy, I've left my lunchbox in the kitchen. So you have to unlock the door again, and it's a juggling act. It's like a military operation, but it's okay, and I enjoy that. I quite enjoy the challenge of getting everybody out the door on time, and but it's quite strange having my daughter being so independent, because she'll happily just leave for school on her own, and she'll just shout, "Bye, Mum," up the stairs, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's her leaving for school then. And it's quite frightening, especially because of the coronavirus situation and stuff. But they're doing what they can to make school safe. And that's all we can do, isn't it? We've got to.
And that brings us to another point, really, the focusing on the things that we can do stuff about. So you can do stuff about helping them to get ready to leave at 8:45, but there's not much we can do about the things that are outside of our control.
And this is the thing, if George leaves his lunchbox on the table, I can't send him to school without his lunch, And he hasn't yet done it at a point where we've been halfway down the road and he's remembered he's forgotten his lunch, because that would be a little bit more alarming or worrying or frustrating kind of thing. But it is what it is. And I think that's the thing with schools, is they are very understanding. So if, for example, George did leave his lunch at home and we didn't realise until he was at school, the school would just ring me and say, do you mind if he has a hot dinner today? And that's okay, because they're not going to leave this child to be hungry, because they would rather that than you go down the school at a later date with his lunchbox, because it's this, what do they call it? I don't know what they call it. They call it something specific at his school, but basically what they're getting at is the less people are coming into the school, the safer it is for the children. And I fully appreciate that. But it has been a very strange start to school for George. But hopefully we're on the way out of it, aren't we? And we're going to finish this school year and everything's going to be really exciting. But who knows? Yeah. Who knows?
I think it's going to be watch this space on that one and see how things develop.
It really is. Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think it's going to be a case of watching what happens, remembering to look after ourselves. So that is a very important thing. It's easier said than done.
It is.
That, but there's nothing wrong with just deciding, do you know what? The sun's out. Like today, the sun was out, Declan was having a nap, George was building Lego, Alexa was in a lesson, and I thought, right, I'm getting my copy of Ant and Dec's new book. I'm going in the garden with a cup of tea and I'm going to sit for 10 minutes in the sun just reading my book, and that's what I did. Because that was time for me in the sunshine, because the sunshine always makes everybody happy. So there we go.
And 10 minutes. Most things, particularly at the moment when we're not so strict on timings and things, most things can shift 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's no biggie. It's not the end of the world. But on that note, Tammi, thank you so much for being a guest here on the group again today and for sharing your insights. It's really good to think about these things, I think, and to be conscious of them.
Yes, yeah, definitely, I agree. It's important to remember to look after yourself, though. Because if you're looking after yourself, everything else will fall into place around that. Or at least that's what I've found. So worth a try. That's definitely worth a try, if nothing else.
Yeah, definitely. That's great words to finish on. Thank you so much, Tammi.
Thank you.
So, thank you to everybody who's watching. And if you're watching on the replay, just stick in #replay. And if you've got any comments or questions, we would love to hear from you. Bye for now.